Well, good morning, everyone. We're here for Small Biz Matters, a half-hour program in which you can work on your business rather than in it. And today we're talking about the elusive work-life balance. In a lot of our programs recently, we've covered admin, business processes, organisation, getting your back end under control. But this week we're looking at more of a broader picture on how to achieve that work-life balance. Our guest is the wonderful Cyril Papillon. Did I get that right?
You got it very right.
A little bit of a throwback to my French ancestry. And Cyril is an expert in his field, and he's the author of Working Smarter, Living Better. That book, we'll let you know where that's available, and that's going to be available on the Breakfast Boys Facebook page, as well as my Facebook page, boydofficemanagement.com.au. So his clients range from small business owners right through to multinationals, but the practicalities, which we're always going on about in this program, are all the same, no matter the size of the business. He's here to help you with practical tips on work-life balance. So it's a topic you've all asked us to cover. We've gone through it in our survey, and nearly everyone has said, how do I get that balance? How do I find a way of balancing my work, my family, my interests, my hobbies, my passions? And so I think you will agree that our guest is the expert by the end of the program, and that aspect is crucial to the success of your business. So first of all, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming on the show, Cyril, and thank you for welcoming me into your beautiful home.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to launch straight into it, because I think that if anybody goes to your website, which is Working Smarter, Living Better.
Yeah, and it's the exact title of the book is Work Smarter, Live Better, and the website worksmarterlivebetter.com.au. You'll find some information, some ideas, and so on. So you're welcome also to browse and find articles and information on it. So yes,
it's a great website. In fact, it's got a lot of research articles that you can look at that Cyril has obviously used in his book, but a lot of extracts out of the book, which is quite generous of you, because I think you can, even just by going to the website, you can actually get quite a lot of information for your business.
Yes, great.
Yeah, so thank you. So launching straight into it now, you show how people think of work-life balance in this way, and it's the same response for we've had our own survey. So these are some of the things that you mention on your website, and again, we've had our survey participants say, I want to come home earlier to see the kids.
Yep.
I want to have more time to go to the gym.
Yes.
And look after my health. I can tell you from my own perspective, my husband's run his own business for 15 years, and that's the first thing to suffer.
Yes.
Because you lack so much sleep and eating well and eating properly. I want to avoid bringing my stress home, so we're going to talk about that a little bit later. And I want to avoid waking up at night thinking about what I forgot to do. And I don't think there's a single business owner out there who doesn't do that.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because work-life balance is something very personal. You can be working 12 hours a day and loving it and thinking that you have got a great work-life balance, and working 7 and 8 hours a day and working that you have a terrible work-life balance. So work-life balance is not something that you can quantify and say this is the reason why. It's something very, very personal. When we work with very large business all the way to small businesses, and when we work with individuals, we ask them a few questions before starting working with them. And the first kind of question is, what challenge are you facing? In a way, what are you struggling with? And the answer we get are quite range from, I'm working long hours, my email is a nightmare, I look at my inbox, my desk is a shambles, my time, I'm running from one meeting to another one, I'm working too much in the business and not enough on the business, I don't have enough time for key thinking, and so on. So this is all the reason why. The interesting question comes after, when you ask, well, so what? Why is that a problem? And in a way, whether you talk to the CEO of a large business, to the GM of a medium-sized business, to the owner of a small business, a lot of people are facing the same things. Talking about email, talking about meeting culture, talking about running from one thing to another one, not enough time to think, and so on. The so what after is a very interesting question. And so, well, why is that a problem? And the answer are quite similar. I mean, quite often you have two kind of answer. You have one answer which is, well, the first so what is my performance. I'm not spending enough time on my business. I'm not spending enough. I know where I want to lead my business. Most people that I speak with are pretty clear on their strategy, on their vision. They know where they want to go. They've been in a small business because they have a vision, they have a passion that they want to fulfill. So they're quite clear what it looks like. but they say, I have no time to really work on it.
Yeah.
I have no time to work on my key project. I have work, and so therefore my performance suffer.
And it sounds to me like you get the feeling that a lot of people are just lurching from one event to the next, either that be sort of a meeting or a phone call or dealing with an email or just putting out the fires of these really small problems that seem to take up half a day.
100%. It's dealing from one crisis to another one, from one issue to another one, and rushing from one thing to another thing. And one of the key things I'm getting asked when I work with people and when we work with my coach people is time to think, time to work on my key priorities, time to work on my key strategies. So on one side, the so what, the impact, is the performance side. I am not spending enough time to really grow my business where I want to grow. The other side is even more interesting. The other side is I'm working too long hours. I'm not seeing my kids. I'm coming home late. When I'm home, I'm still thinking about work.
Yeah.
So my body might be at home, but my brain is still in the office.
Yes.
I'm working sometimes weekends. Even when I don't work weekends, the stress is still here. My health is suffering. And a very interesting example where a business called me because one of their managers, and there's an example with a large business, but it relates to everyone. One of their managers, they wanted me to coach him personally. So I said, well, why is that? So he's a high performer, but we're going to lose him.
Burnout.
He's burning out.
Yeah.
And so we are going to lose a high performer. And so we review with him, and we had a 6-month journey where he completely changed his work habits. We reviewed everything what he was doing. And one of the key factors of success that he wanted from this journey, when we work with a team or with someone, we write down very clearly why we're doing that. And for him, one of his key factors of success was work-life balance. And one of his measurement was feedback from my wife. He wanted to get, and we're talking about a large business who's paying, an executive coaching to work with us on working with someone. Black and white was written. At the end of the journey, we'll measure the impact of this journey by the feedback from my wife.
So you literally spoke to his wife to say, right, what's happening at the beginning? How's he going? And then,
Exactly.
And that's something I think our listeners can really utilize. Your family is a resource as part of your business, and why not speak to them and say, okay, what am I doing badly? I mean, you know it. A lot of what we discuss is sort of innately known anyway, but really sit down with them, if your children are old enough, but sit down with them and say, what would you like to see change? And also make that a goal. Make that a goal.
I mean, it's the deathbed question. And the deathbed question, on your deathbed, who's going to be more important? The email that you haven't done, or the time that you should have spent with your kids and your wife? And the answer is obvious.
Yes, it is.
This is work-life balance.
It's obvious when you look at the bigger picture, but when you're entrenched and you're in that day and you're in that moment, sometimes that email, that problem, that solution is the only thing you can focus on.
100%. And that's the biggest issue behind work-life balance, our main focus when we work with a team is simple word. It's transforming someone's life by changing their work habits. And I repeat those words because they're very important. Transforming someone's life by changing their work habits. And behind the work-life balance, behind the work habits, there's this issue that I call effectiveness or leadership, which means that we are so often in crisis, in reactive mode, rather than being in proactive. Whether it's on our business, what we mentioned a bit earlier, I'm spending too much time in the business, not enough on the business, or whether it's on our life, our personal life, I'm too much in the day-to-day and I forget the big picture. And the big picture is one day my young kids will be grown and I will have gone from home and I would have missed some wonderful time with them. One day my wife and I will have grown apart, or my husband and I will have grown apart and we'll be divorced because we haven't spent enough time. One day I'll have a health that is not what it should be, and so therefore that will have an impact for the rest of my life because I haven't taken care of that. This is the big picture. And so it's always this dichotomy between the urgency, the reactiveness, the crisis now, and the big picture. And it's how we can change that back from actually the big picture is what really counts, and we need to move away from the reactiveness and the urgency.
Okay, we're going to take a short break now and listen to a bit of tunes from the Breakfast Boys. We're going to come back and we're going to actually talk about some practical strategies that you can do to find that balance. And as you said, Cyril, that balance between the bigger picture versus the immediacy of what needs to be achieved now.
Great, looking forward.
We'll be back. Okay, we're back on the show, and we're looking at part 2, which is just all about sort of working smarter. And it's about these practical strategies, as we mentioned before the break, on how to find the bigger picture versus finding those solutions in your business to feel like you're moving forward, but still maintaining that bigger picture, that work-life balance in your mind with everyday actions. So I'm just going to take a small statement out of your book just to get started.
Yes.
Most of us have never been really taught how to work. And it's a very bold statement to start with. However, in our view, it is one of the most important reasons for lack of execution and lowers expected performance. Most people are committed to their role and want to do a good job. They're neither lazy nor unwilling, but they are not working effectively. They work hard, but not smart. So tell me where you came up with that phrase.
It's almost an observation, having worked with, I say, hundreds, if not thousands of people, where we've coached, we've trained. I mean, in our business, as I mentioned, the center of what we do is transforming someone's life by changing their work habits. And the way we do that goes from one-on-one executive coaching, small group coaching, training. I do a lot of public speaking, the book. And so we touch quite a lot of people. And something that comes over and over and over again is it that simple? Why no one showed that to me 20 years ago? It is.
Where was this 10 years ago? Exactly.
Now, let me explain. We go to school, we go to university when we're young, and we learn a qualification. So you become a doctor, you become an engineer, you become an accountant, and one day you start working. And I'll give you some typical example what happened. You're given a desk, you're given a computer, and you're given some responsibilities, some priorities. And I'm going to take some very simple example. The first thing we look when we work with someone, it's his desk. And I've seen in all my years of coaching so many different ways of organizing your desk and your file. From I have nothing on my desk because that's the way I like it, to I keep a clean desk, but I keep on the side of my desk my priorities. I've got a pile which is my hot priorities. To I've got on one side my hot priorities and I've got on the other side my reading pile. To I've got my priorities, I've got my reading pile, and I've got a few pile here and there. Two, this is my desk with documents everywhere.
I can't see it.
But I can't see it. Actually, funny you mentioned that. I had someone one day who said to me, Cyril, I have 2 desks. This was my previous desk, but there were so many people on it that I couldn't get access to it anymore that I had to move to this new one. I've seen that.
Oh my goodness.
I have seen a lady who could hardly sit at her desk because there were so many people under the desk. The point I want to make here, Alexi, is if you ask someone, why are you doing this way? What led you to this habit? Most people will say, I don't know, but I had so many documents that I tried to find a system that seemed to be working for me. Is that the best way of doing it? Maybe yes, maybe no. I've never been shown how to do this.
Right.
Email, same story. You ask people how they manage their inbox. And email is fascinating because email grew on us. We're getting more and more and more emails. 10 years ago, you would be receiving 2, 3, 4 emails per day. Email was fun. Email was exciting. It's been a very long time since I haven't heard anyone talking about email and excitement together. And so again, I said, well, how do you manage this flow of information? Email, Cyril, is a nightmare. I come first thing in the morning and I log in and I do my email. Then I go to a meeting and I come back and I do my email. Now I've got my wonderful tool called iPhone or BlackBerry. Email is following me all the time, even when I'm home.
Exactly.
How many business owners, how many small business, how many large business, how many people are still doing email out of working hours?
So how do you combat that consistent flow of information, and how do you put yourself a brick wall between you and it without meaning that you feel out of touch with what's going on and then you've got to fall behind?
Now, do you want, there's 2 levels. We can talk about email specifically, or we can talk about the big picture. What are the simple advice that I would give all your listeners about how to work effectively?
Let's go big picture, because I think everyone can probably take the big picture. We're intelligent enough here in Hornsby to look at the big picture and how can I apply that to each of these aspects. Okay,
so when I ask managers, when I ask employees, when I ask people that I work with, I say, what are you struggling with? Very often people will say, Cyril, I know what I'm supposed to do. Call it strategy, call it vision, call it priorities, but look at my day, but look at the number of emails, but look at the number of meetings and so on. So what I've seen very often happen is we're clear on the vision, we're clear on the long-term vision, but how does that translate into our day-to-day basis? How do we close the gap between the long-term vision, long-term strategy, and how do we align with what we do on a day-to-day, hour per hour? Very simple logic that I suggest. My first suggestion is what I call think quarterly. My second is plan weekly. My third is act daily. Let me explain. Think quarterly, plan weekly, act daily. Very simple. Think quarterly. It's great to have a vision. It's great to have a strategy. Every quarter, on your own, you need to ask yourself a very simple question. What are the 2 or 3 things, not 5, not 10,
Not the bottom of the page,
No,
like
but
I
no,
do
no.
when I'm running lists.
2 or 3 things that if I did extremely well and nothing else, over the next 3 months, would have a significant impact long-term on my performance. 2 or 3.
No more.
No more. Then if I do it extremely well, so what I mean by extremely well is, I know that you will do other things. I know you will check email. I know you have meeting. But in your mentality, you think quarterly, on a quarterly basis, you say, there are 2 or 3 things that are really going to have an impact for this business. They might not be urgent. And that's the old dichotomy between urgency and importancy. But there's 2 or 3 things that if I really do them very well, and I say no to the rest, or, which is a very hard concept for a lot of people, I accept to do a poor job on the rest. So I accept to be a perfectionist and put all my energy in 2 or 3 things that I'm really going to do very well, because they're really going to drive me closer to my strategy, to my vision. And I accept that I can't do everything, so I accept that I do a poor job very well. Over the next 3 months is a very, very specific period, will have a significant impact long-term on my business. My logic here is not who's asking for it, it's not how urgent it is how important and what impact it will have.
So the quarterly targets are about business growth.
Yes.
And what 3, no more than 3, what 3 things can I do that's going to grow my business? And I know because I've been doing my business for a long time. What are those 3 things? I'll just give you an example from my perspective.
Yes.
I have had a list as long as a page for
Yes.
the last month. And I can tell you only 2 of those things I've actually achieved. So if I'd only put 2 things on the top of that list at the beginning of the month and said, right, those are the 2 things I really want to do. And for me, it's been a DL flyer that I can do letter drops with, and it's been doing the programming for this show. Now, if I just focused on those 2 things, I would have achieved them. I probably would have achieved them a lot more successfully.
100%.
Because I haven't got all the little flitty, flighty things going on in the
Because
background.
you're diluting yourself. Performance is about quality, not about quantity. Quantity is an enemy. If you take too much on, you will fail. I love the mantra of Steve Jobs. I mean, what an amazing entrepreneur who started Apple from the back of his garage, so small business entrepreneur, created an international business, got kicked out of Apple in the 70s, came back 10 years after and took Apple on the verge of collapsing to become the biggest IT company in the world. What is the mantra of Steve Jobs? Forward, or what was, I should say. Forwards. Focus means saying no. Focus means saying no. If you take too much on, you will fail. You are diluting yourself. If you if you have 10 or 15 key priorities, plus all the amount of other things you have to do, the amount of time that you're spending on each priority every week is very limited. I'd rather you choose 2 or 3 and you say, I forget the rest.
I really love that expression. I love that expression, diluting yourself. I think that's
100%.
so important.
There was an executive of Apple who made a speech once, and I really resonate what he said. He said, saying no to bad ideas is very easy. Saying no to good ideas is very hard. This is what we do every day at Apple. You have to have the courage of saying, I'm going to select 2 or 3. Yes, there might be, and I'm sure your listeners, and I'm sure all the business owners, they're creative, they're entrepreneurs, and they can be the best enemy or the worst enemy, which means they have great ideas, but sometimes because they have too many great ideas, they're diluting themselves. Choose 2 or 3. And for the next quarter, this is where you're going to focus.
And be focused on those things.
That's my first logic, is the think quarterly. My second advice is plan weekly. So on a quarterly basis, you write down those ideas. You do a 90-day plan. So you say, this is going to be, I call that my compass plan. So every quarter, I say there's 2 or 3 things that I'm going to do really, really well. And I agree with myself what they are and what success is going to look like. I'm accountable to myself about what I want to deliver on those 2 or 3. So you're talking about your 2 examples. You need to be very clear for those 2 examples at the end of next quarter exactly where you want to take them.
Yep.
My second step is plan weekly. Every week, every single week, Alexi, I never ever miss it. I take my compass plan, which is my 90-day plan, and I say, this is what's really critical for me and my business. And with that in mind, I completely reorganize my next week. I book a lot of meetings with myself.
Interesting.
I book a lot of meetings with myself and with the relevant people to work on it.
And that's not a meeting for you to check your emails, is it?
No. If I have said, look, I need to work on this project for an hour on Wednesday between 10 to 11, this meeting, I have the same respect for this meeting that if I had a meeting with someone else. I'm on time. I'm not distracted. Let me give you a very simple example. If you have a meeting with a very important person, you interview someone or you have a very important client, would you arrive to the meeting late?
No.
Would you come to the meeting with your laptop and say to the person, look, I've got a stack of email. While we're talking, I just need to check it. Would you come with your phone and say, look, I've got a few phone calls to do while we're talking. You know what it is. Of course not. Would you have other people coming in and out of the meeting asking you a question? Of course not. When you have a meeting with someone important, you're on time, you're focused, you're not doing your email, you're not talking to other people, you're not making any phone calls. This is exactly the same discipline that you need to have when you have a meeting with yourself to work on your key priorities. Mm-hmm. You're on time, you're not checking email, you turn off your inbox, you turn off your phone, and you only focus on this meeting.
And that's those 2 quarterly priorities that you've created, and that's the time you're spending on those.
The plan weekly, every week I focus on those. Every week I make that happen, and I book meeting with myself for the next week. So I sit down and reorganize my next week.
See, the thing is, I think when we think of things quarterly, I know because of the BAS mentality that we've all got, we think, okay, 3 months, that's a long time. But in reality, that's 12 weeks. So you're asking yourself to work on these very key, important strategies that you've decided are going to grow your business, potentially only 12 times. So when you think of it in terms of 12 meetings to achieve these 2 big things, that's 6 meetings each, that's only 6 hours, that's not a lot of time. So if you can't spend 6 hours over sort of a 3-month period working on one of those 2 strategies, how are you going to grow?
Exactly. And it's funny because I'll tell you, a quarter goes very, very quickly. Someone had this beautiful expression once, and it was talking about work-life balance. It say, days are long, but years are short. Before you know, a year is gone.
I think any mothers out there would totally agree. Days are very long and years are very short.
Before you know, a year has gone and say, what I have achieved? Where has it gone? Before you know, you're 40, you're 50, you're 60, and you're wondering where that has gone. Make what's really important a priority. Think quarterly. Plan weekly, organizing your diary, and on a daily basis, we can talk a little bit more about that, but have the discipline and focus, as I mentioned. If you have a book meeting with yourself, just respect it.
So we're going to play a song now. I want everyone to, while they're having this wonderful music repertoire wash over them, I want you to think about what could potentially be those 2 things you would like to achieve at the end of the quarter. Just give it some thought. We're going to come back after the break and talk about how to achieve those things on a daily level. How do you keep your steps moving forward on a daily level to achieve those quarterly outcomes?
Great.
We'll be right back.
Great idea.
Okay, everyone, we're back with our wonderful guest, Cyril Papillon, who has written a wonderful book called Work Smarter, Live Better. And that's going to be available, a link on our website to his website, which has wonderful amounts of information about finding that true, real high achieving task of how do you find that work-life balance? And that's what we're discussing today. So we've just been talking about, how to work smarter on a quarterly and weekly level, and how to find those quarterly goals and condense them down into meetings with yourself. And I think that's a really wonderful expression. And we talked about not diluting yourself with too many tasks. And I am a big, big victim of that. I feel as though if I haven't written a list, it hasn't got to the bottom of the page. It's not a real list. And often those lists, it gets a bit crazy. I'll transcribe them across to another piece of paper if I haven't achieved it, and it keeps rolling over, whereas I haven't actually given myself a deadline. And I think we all know quarterly deadlines. It's now, entrenched into us because of the wonderful thing called BAS. So make that a deadline time limit for your business.
100%.
So 2 to 3 tasks, and then condensing it down to those meetings with yourself. And just run over those quick little rules that you've got for when you're having a meeting with yourself, Cyril.
Yeah, and the danger is, and that's why I've got this strategy called Think Quarterly, Plan Weekly, Act Daily. Let's now talk about the Act Daily. Because on a daily basis, you will have a lot of time thieves. You will have a lot of things that will take away your attention.
I blame my children.
Blame your children, lovely time thieves. There's a lot of things that is going to steal your attention from what you're supposed to do. One of the biggest issues is crisis. One of the big issues is, all the urgency. It's a very old concept in the world of time management, but there's an inverse relationship between urgency and importancy. The quote is not from me, the quote is from General Eisenhower. General Eisenhower was saying that, do not bother me with anything which is urgent. If it's urgent, it's too late. We've lost the battle.
Wow.
I'm here to win the war. Now, he was not like all of us managing P&L. He was managing life and death. But he hadn't understood, and for him that was very clear, that we need to focus on the big picture, because if we only focus on the urgency, we are losing the big picture. So every day you'll be taken away from those book meetings with yourself, from those key projects. Why? Because a lot of those are long-term.
And they're not a priority in your mind.
Because they're not. Now, the most important rule of prioritization is prioritize because of impact, not because of deadline. Let me repeat. Prioritize because of impact, not because of deadlines. You have 2 things to do. The first one is due for today. Someone is shouting for it. The second one, you've got 3 months to do. Most people will start with the first one. High performers ask themselves another question. What impact will each of them have? And if the answer is the second one, which is due in 3 months, will have more impact, they start with the second one. That's how they prioritize.
That's really hard to do, to have that
It
sort of
is
discipline.
really hard to do. That's one of the biggest mind shifts you need to create. Once you have that, then you need to make sure that when you have block time, then of course you're not going to spend 10 hours a day working on those big projects. You're going to have, but you need to still find 3, 4, 5, 6 hours per day to spend on the key project. And yes, leave 2, 3, 4 hours per day on your crisis. But find the right balance between the two. It depends on your job, it depends on your level, and so on. When you have block time with yourself to work on a key project, as I mentioned earlier, be focused. Focus is one of the key characteristics of high performer. This ability of saying, when I'm doing something, I'm 100% immersed into it. Nothing else exists. For 1 hour, I'm going to be talking, I'm going to try mentally to block away all those urgency in my mind, to block away all the crises, and for 1 hour, or 1 hour and a half, or 2 hours, I'm going to work on this long-term project and give it 100% of me.
So let's give an example. For example, last week I was working on my website. I was trying to build a new blogs and podcasts page for the show. I was actually quite impressively disciplined. I closed Facebook.
Yes.
See, in my mind, I say, well,
Great.
Facebook is part of my business. It's where I communicate with my clients, but I closed it. I closed my emails.
Yes.
Actually, I've got 3 different email accounts, and I closed all of them. So all I was left with was the actual applications that were relevant just to that thing. And I think even the simple task of doing that does make you focus more. Some people work better with music. I know, for example, you can have upbeat music, which will just get you a bit more motivated, or you can have some relaxation music that just allows your brain to switch off and just focus on that one thing with a little bit of sort of calming music in the background. Try and figure out what those things are that are not about, allowing you, more about just finding that relaxation point where you can actually focus. Because you're right, you cannot do it when you've got a million other things impacting in, and turn your phone off.
100%.
Your world's not going to collapse if your phone is switched off for an hour.
There's many surveys about the impact on our performance of trying to do 2 or 3 things at once. And they're not from me. There's a lot of research. They've even done research on our brains. For those who are interested, there's a very interesting book called Our Brain at Work. And the research really shows that as soon as you try to do 2 or 3 things at once, you dramatically reduce the level of your performance. The quality of your work is diminished. And very interestingly, you spend more time doing 3 things at once than doing one, finishing it, doing the second one, finishing it, and doing the third one. Very interesting. focus. Very, very important.
And I think from a female perspective, there's this expectation of society to be brilliant at everything. We have to be the perfect mother. We have to be fantastic at our business. If you're passionate about something, of course it's going to come naturally to you. But I think, and this is something that I always harp on the program, is that if there are aspects in your business that you can't do well yourself, there is a point, no matter how much focus you do, that you're going to need to say to yourself, you know what, I'm really crap at this. I need to find someone to help me, support me, or maybe outsource it. Don't try and bang your head against a brick wall to achieve something that you can't do. If you're not an accountant, don't try and be an accountant. And I mean, as small business owners, we wear dozens and dozens of hats, and sometimes those hats don't fit.
It's very interesting mentioning that because I was doing a session recently with one of my clients. I have the pleasure to be distributed. My book is distributed around Australia, but I have the pleasure also to be distributed by Kiki K. I don't know if you heard the shop
I love
Kiki K.
Oh, God, I could spend hours in Kiki K.
And Christina Carson, who's the owner and the director of Kiki K, I know her fairly well. She called me. She wanted to distribute. We've been distributing for a while, and she asked me. She said, "Cyril, come and do a session for my team." I said, "All right, come and do a session in your head office."
Is that the managers of each of the stores?
And no, for the head office.
The head office.
The head office.
Yeah.
So they have a head office near Melbourne, came, and we did a session. And one topic I chose was focus. And they loved it. And she said, "Cyril, it resonated with every one of my team." Because we had an hour and a half session where we talked about a lot of things and we discussed some priority rule, we discussed focus and so on. But when we spoke about focus, they all like, this is us. We work in an open plan. We constantly interrupted each other. And she has such high standard. She's a wonderful lady with great high standard. She's both a wonderful wife. She works with Paul, her husband, in the business. She's got kids. She travels internationally. She speaks. And she drives a business who is becoming global. And she said, well, this is our life. All of us, we are trying to do so many things. And we spoke about a team, about interruptions. We spoke about distraction. We spoke about focus. They all resonated and loved it.
Do you know what's something that's really interesting? And we have not even used this word once in the entire 30 minutes we've been speaking. And that is multitasking.
Yeah.
And I've got a feeling that you think that multitasking... Tell me what you think. I'm not going to make it. I'm going to presume. Put words in your mouth. Tell me what you think about multitasking and that.
Very bluntly,
concept. Yes.
multitasking is a waste of time. And what I mean by the waste of time, I do a very interesting exercise with my clients where I make them do 2 tasks at once. Very simple task, really simple task, basic task that any of our kids can do. So I'm talking about ground level task, and I make them do 2 tasks at once, and I measure how long it's going to take them. Mm-hmm. And then I ask them to do the first one, finish it off.
Yep.
And to do the second one, finish it off.
Yep.
So in one exercise, they're multitasking. Mm-hmm. In the other exercise, they're focusing on one, finishing up, and focusing on the other one. When they're multitasking, it never, ever miss. When they're multitasking, it takes them 3 times more.
3 times.
3 times.
Not just double, but 3 times.
3 times is what I have found doing this exercise with hundreds of people. 3 times more than when they do once, finish it off, and do the second one. I do not believe in multitasking. Yes, ladies are probably better at multitasking. So rather than being 4 times, it might be 3 times. But it still takes you more time.
Right.
Do one thing, finish it off, and then get your brain to another thing and finish it off.
And as women, we're incredibly focused as well. So we've got to use that focus instead of using it across multiple platforms.
100%.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Well, listen, I'm super excited. I have a mental list that is only 2 or 3 things long of things that I'm going to change about my work habits, trying to find that work-life balance. You've been incredibly helpful today. We'll tell everybody on our Facebook page, at the Breakfast Boys Facebook page on Triple H, as well as the Boyd Office Management Services website and Facebook page. And so thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Cheers.